Hello there, and welcome to the very first official episode of the Beyond Blood Sugar podcast. I'm so excited to kick this off with you today. So, if you've ever been told to just watch your blood sugar or take your meds and you'll be fine, but deep down, you know that there's more to the story, stick around because that's exactly what we're going to talk about today. So, let's start this with a question. Why is this podcast called Beyond Blood Sugar? I mean, isn't blood sugar the whole issue when it comes to diabetes? Well, yes and no, it's important, but here's the thing. Blood sugar is what most doctors and mainstream advice focus on. You're told to check your glucose, keep it in range, maybe even take medication to lower it if needed. But what if I told you that blood sugar is just the symptom and not the root cause? Some people know this, but a lot of people are kind of taken aback when I say that, right? Think of it like this. Imagine you have a leaky faucet. You notice water pooling on the floor. So you keep mopping it up. You might even put down some towels or use a bucket to catch the drips, but you never actually fix the leak. The problem never goes away then, right? Your floor might be dry, but that's just the symptom. The leak is still there. So that's what happens when we only focus on blood sugar. The leak is insulin resistance. And that's what's driving the whole issue. I mean, there's always exceptions to the rule, okay? But in most cases, that's the rule. So let's take a step back. What does it actually mean when insulin resistance is happening behind the scenes? What's the timeline? So, insulin resistance can develop for years, even decades, before you see blood sugar numbers going up. So you might think everything's fine because your doctor isn't sounding any alarms, but insulin levels could be sky high without you even knowing it, and without them even knowing it, for that matter. And when insulin stays high for too long, it leads to a cascade of problems: weight gain, fatigue, cravings, inflammation, disease, and blood sugar spikes eventually. So here's where it gets interesting. Most standard lab tests don't measure insulin. Most doctors don't ask for lab tests that measure insulin. You could have insulin resistance for years, and as long as your fasting glucose looks fine, no one flags it. That's why focusing on blood sugar alone is not enough. We need to start looking at what's happening behind the scenes because when you get insulin under control, blood sugar follows. I'm not deep diving into anything today overly so. We're kind of just starting by, looking at this from a surface level, okay? And touching on what the root issue is. But that's kind of what this whole podcast is going to be about, is diving into these issues. So let's talk about insulin. Because if you've never really thought about it before, this is going to be a game changer for you. So, insulin is a hormone that your body produces. And one of the things that it does, because it does a lot of things, but one of the things that it does is to help move sugar, glucose, out of your blood and into your cells where it can be used for energy. Sounds great, right? The problem is when insulin levels stay too high for too long, your body starts to become resistant to it. That means it takes more insulin to do the same job. And that's where things start to go downhill. And I am way oversimplifying here, but for this particular episode, you can get the basic idea. So let's break it down a little bit more. Imagine insulin is the key and your cells have locks. Okay, this is the classic example. When everything is working well, the key, insulin, opens the lock, allowing the sugar to enter the cells and to be used for energy. But with insulin resistance, it's like the lock gets rusty. Okay, the key doesn't work as well. So your body keeps producing more keys, insulin, in an attempt to force that lock open. Eventually, your body's drowning in insulin and your blood sugar still isn't being managed well. And your body works really, really hard to maintain homeostasis. This is critical for optimal health. There is a very narrow range that your body wants your blood sugar in. So it will keep pumping out the insulin in a desperate attempt to lower your blood glucose levels. Okay. The excess insulin doesn't just affect blood sugar, though. It affects your hunger, your cravings, your energy levels, and your fat storage. Because guess what? One of the other jobs of insulin is it's a fat storage hormone. Remember, I said it does a lot of things, where one of the other things is it being a fat storage hormone. So, how about this? Have you ever felt like you eat a meal and then you're starving again in an hour? That could be insulin at work, driving hunger even when you shouldn't be hungry. And here's the kicker: when insulin is high, your body literally cannot burn fat efficiently. It keeps storing fat instead. That's why some people feel like they, quote, gain weight just by looking at food. It's not in their head, it's a hormonal response. Okay. So if you're struggling with, just energy in general, or being hungry all the time, or constantly gaining weight, insulin resistance might be playing a pretty major role in that. So, how do you know if insulin is creeping up behind the scenes? Well, first and foremost, those are blood tests, but we'll get to that in a minute. But there's some clues that often show up way before blood sugar becomes an issue. Several of these are you feel hungry after eating. You're struggling a lot with cravings, especially like for sugar and carbs. You're gaining weight, especially around your midsection, and it feels just impossible to lose. You feel exhausted after meals instead of, having energy. You're dealing with brain fog and energy crashes and mood swings throughout the day. So if any of these sound familiar, it's time to start paying attention, because while they can mean other things, right? If it's related to insulin resistance, and a lot of these are, these signs start showing up years before diabetes is ever diagnosed. Your doctor can tell your insulin levels, by the way, by measuring your fasting insulin level along with the corresponding glucose, or do a challenge test where you're consuming carbs. Okay, so there are lab tests that your doctor can run to give you that measurement behind the scenes. So the good news is there's a lot that you can do to help improve that insulin sensitivity and reduce that insulin resistance. And that's exactly what we're going to be covering in upcoming episodes and throughout this whole podcast. So we're going to leave it there for episode 1. I just wanted to get your feet wet, okay? And I hope this has opened your eyes a little bit as to why blood sugar is just one piece of the puzzle, and why we need to start looking at insulin first. Okay. So next time, we're going to dive into why you're feeling hungry, tired, having sugar cravings, even when you think you're eating right. So, another episode you don't want to miss. So if you found this episode at all helpful, make sure to subscribe so you don't miss anything about what's coming next. And if you have any questions or topics that you want me to cover, just send them my way. My email address and my Facebook group is in the show notes. You can find them there. So thanks for listening, and I'll see you on the next episode.